So what about the future of communications? Will snail mail become obsolete one day? TV broadcast ads become obsolete? Either one of you.
Look, one thing first off, it becomes harder and harder to reach people on mail and broadcast television. So that is the trend line. It's still the bulk of, I think, both of our budgets, although Chris could speak for himself there. Look, I think that the average voter, so in the primary, the electorate was 65% 50 and older, and in the general election, we don't have the voter file yet, but I think it's probably going to be about 59% 50 and older. That's a lot older than the average consumer. And so what you're seeing in both mail advertising and TV broadcast advertising and cable advertising is that the campaigns are still using it, but it's being weaned off of commercial advertisers. But the average voter is older than the average consumer. And so you still have to meet voters where they are, and you do have to look at the ratings and the data and look at how you communicate and how it overlaps with your voters. But and this is like lingo, but 1,000 points of broadcast television used to get an ad across. Now it takes 2,000. I mean, you have to double the volume. It is harder and harder to crack through. And so it becomes so important, at least while we're in this transition phase, and I agree with the premise, right? It's getting harder and harder to reach on television, harder on mail, but you still have to do it because that's where the most amount of voters are, particularly voters. But to seed any medium would be a disaster. Right? So you have to do the television, you have to do cable, you have to be on radio, but you also have to be in the digital space and in as many platforms as possible. And you truly want to be able to, the goal of any campaign is in the last few weeks to dominate, if you can, as many mediums as possible with the most resonant message. And so I think we're far away from saying goodbye to mail and broadcast television, but it is an instructive point. There's a lot of voters that aren't there anymore, and you got to find ways to communicate them. And that's why campaigns get so expensive. You have to be everywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely agree with that. But I do think there's a few things. We're getting a little, with technology, we don't want to get too far away. It's great. But I also see a lot of personalization in voter contact goes a long way too. And what I mean by that, so I agree with everything you said, Brad, but my point is people are starting to appreciate more of the personal contact too. And what I mean by that is we were doing, instead of just a palm card or something like that or a postcard, we would actually have volunteers come in throughout the state and do handwritten notes to voters saying, I need you to get out and vote in this election. It is so important that you vote for Ed Gillespie. And we're seeing when you do those types of things, you actually do see an increase in voter turnout because I think they're getting bogged down. Voters in many ways get bogged down with so much that they need something a little bit different. And there's always, I don't think snail mail will, eventually might go away, but I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon because they just really appreciate getting that message through the mailbox. And I would just emphasize, when you're on these campaigns and you're working on them, you're always trying to find ways to be authentic and a little bit more original and to find some avenues to really inspire people rather than just regular mail, TV, digital phones, or radio. You're trying to kind of look outside the box in some ways.
So quickly, what about print journalism? Newspaper subscriptions really declining. Are print journalists less a priority to your campaigns than they used to be?
No, I wouldn't say they're less of a priority. I would say it's frustrating that there's not more of them at times because when you get localized and you have local reporters following this stuff every single day, frankly, I think we probably would have got some more of the policy proposals that we put forward actually covered in the print.